Challengers, directed by Luca Guadagnino, stars Zendaya, Josh O'Connor, and Mike Feist. The film follows a tennis player turned coach who's taken and turned her husband into a world champion. To jolt him out of his recent losing streak, she signs him up to a Challenger event where he finds himself standing across the net from his former best friend and his wife's former boyfriend. I've been excited to see this film since the trailers for it started getting released sometime last year, as this was actually supposed to be a 2023 release. However, due to the strikes that were happening, it was delayed until now. Like, honestly, I felt like I'd been seeing the trailers for this film for ages, so after all of that waiting, was it worth it? Firstly, I want to talk about the performances in this film, as it's one of the strongest factors and is one of the aspects that really carries the film. I can honestly say, I think this is probably Zendaya's best performance of her whole career. Sure, she was pretty good in both parts of Dune, but this is the first film I've seen her in where I can safely call her a true actress. Maybe it helps that this is another one of the very few real films she starred in, as the majority of her career so far has been franchise movies. She really puts out so much in this film. I don't think I've ever seen her act in such a menacing and bitchy manner. The character of Tashi is, in terms of recent films, one of the biggest bitches I've ever seen on screen, and I can already see a group of people putting a character like this on a pedestal and calling the character a girl boss, which is absolutely not the case, but seeing how she's able to control and manipulate many situations is interesting to see unfold. As this film jumps back and forth between the characters past and present, it's made clear that this has been her character for years. She never seems to grow worse as a person or even gets better as a person, and surprisingly, with the way this film is written, that doesn't end up being a flaw like you'd expect it to be in other films. It feels devastatingly realistic, as there are nasty people like this in real life who just never change their shitty ways. Mike Feist is another powerhouse in this film too. I've known about the guy since his Dear Evan Hansen days, and it's always really cool to see him getting more roles, since with everything I've seen him in, he always puts out a good performance. He's really great here. He's able to convey so much in his facial expressions and is able to do so much when he plays the parts of his character in the present as this slightly broken and desperate man who seeks the utmost approval of his wife. So much so that there's points where he will almost look like a wounded dog. It's really interesting to see. When it comes to the points in his past, you can never tell what he's going to do and whether he's more cunning than he lets on to be. And I think as well, that's another interesting aspect of his performance. Josh O'Connor was pretty good here as well. Seeing the relationship between his character and Zendaya and how he deals with it is another aspect that feels true to form on how toxic relationships can be. When we get to the present sections with his character, he's pretty good there as well. While there isn't too much nuance to his character like he is with Feist's character, he's still good. As I keep mentioning with the story going back and forth, we're basically subjected to a film with a really strong non-linear story structure, which is constantly going from the character's past to their present, but sometimes it will be in different orders where it's not entirely clear sometimes at what point they're at, but I feel like this really worked for the film. You're slowly fed more information on these three people's relationships with each other and the decline of such, and you realize why this tennis match that the two guys are playing in the present is much more intense. The cinematography in this film is spectacular. It's so incredibly well shot. I love the moment near the end of the movie where the camera becomes the POV of a tennis ball, and somehow this doesn't become really disorientating. It's fun, it's exciting, and really thrilling, despite this being only a short moment in the film. As well as this, there's just so many other moments that look stunning. The soundtrack for this film is incredible too. I had no idea till the credits started rolling that the soundtrack was done by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. This soundtrack by them is so infectiously pumping. There's moments in songs where it has a palette similar to the style of the band LCD Sound System, and even some trance house music is definitely inspired this soundtrack too. There's aspects that feels like it belongs perfectly with the type of music you'd hear in a sports setting. I felt myself silently moving in my seat to a lot of the tracks when they were being played on screen. I can honestly see myself loving this soundtrack just as much as their Social Network soundtrack. All the real negatives I have for this film was where there was a slight moment where I was thinking the film just kept going and going and kind of building on each other, and there was for a second I thought it was going to drag, but once it got to the height of this tennis match between the two guys is extremely exciting and thrilling to see. I swear there was a point where I was about to be on the edge of my seat, and this is basically the ending of the movie, and I can safely say I think not only is the ending of this movie fantastic, but the ending could very well be perfect. I really like this film. I'm still very on the fence when it comes to sports movies, but when it comes to stuff like this, where it really goes all in with the emotional aspects of their personal lives intertwined with the sports, it really grips me. The fact that this movie uses the sport of tennis as a metaphor for their whole relationship is really interesting to see as well. I'm giving Challengers 4.5 stars. This is an incredibly gripping, thrilling, and exciting piece of cinema that had me really engaged from start to finish. I loved all of the storytelling throughout this movie, and it's made me really interested to look at other movies by Luca Guadagnino. I think it's absolutely worth a watch on the big screen, as well as these type of original movies need to be supported and deserve all of the money going from when people get to experience them on the big screen, because movies like this just absolutely deserves people's time. Go watch it. I highly recommend it. I love this.